Just double checking.
Always.
All right. So as an introduction, we'd like to acknowledge that our mission at Vose Library is to advance learning, inspire curiosity, enrich lives, and promote community. And I'm going to introduce our wonderful Chris Toy. Chris has been teaching cooking for over 40 years. He retired teacher, principal, and international educational consultant. Chris learned Asian cooking in his family's home and restaurant kitchens. As an adult, he's explored and become skilled at creating recipes that incorporate fresh local ingredients. And it smells really nice here, just so you know. As an adult, in addition to teaching at local kitchen stores, Chris teaches adult education classes in several communities around Bath, where he lives with his wife, Joan. Chris, a registered Maine guide, enjoys hiking, cycling, kayaking, and camping in the woods and waters of Maine's great outdoors. You can find Chris at christoy.net or on his YouTube cooking channel, youtube.com/user/CMToy. Without further ado, please help me welcome Chris Toy. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful library your community has.
Thank you very much.
I must say. So, welcome, and tonight we're going to walk you through one of my favorite soups. Just by way of background, wonton soup was our family's holiday gathering meal. What we would do is we would get the extended family together, which when I was little probably was in excess of 20 people when you had family and friends. And so like on Christmas Eve, we would all get together and gather around the table, the kitchen table, and make wontons. And then we would set them aside and we would all go to church for the midnight service and do our carols and the Christmas story and everything else. Then we would all come back and it would be late, and we would just basically boil up our dumplings, our wontons, and make our soup, get some hot soup. Everyone got to open one present before everyone headed off to bed. And so we didn't have visions of sugar plums, but we had visions of wontons floating in our soup. So that was good. By the way, wonton actually means pillows floating in the clouds, or clouds floating in the soup. So it's kind of a poetic name. So let's get started. All of the ingredients here you can get locally, which is what I wanted to do. You can kind of, if you want to take a trip to Portland in town, you can also get some things there. So to start with, the broth. My favorite quick broth is something called Better Than Bullion. And you may have heard of it, but it's a really high quality broth. Doesn't have a lot of chemicals in it, and they have, I think, close to like 24 different flavors of broth. Everything from chicken and beef and ham. They even have a lobster broth. So if you wanted to make a seafood soup, you could do that. The broth that I'm going to use tonight is actually a vegetarian broth. It's a vegetarian chicken broth. And when you make the broth, you want to make it half strength. So that means if it says a teaspoon for 1 cup or 8 ounces, you want to use a teaspoon for 2 cups. Because the recipe for most bouillon is very, very salty, relatively strong, and that's not what we want here. We want a light broth. If you didn't use this and you wanted to use a canned or boxed, like College Inn or something like that, that would be, you could use that straight, because that is a more, it's not as concentrated. So I'm going to put in a couple tablespoons because I have a couple quarts of broth here. And I'm just going to mix that in. And so most of the flavor of the soup is going to come from the seasoning in the wontons. So let's just put that in. So I've got the broth is going to be in here simmering. And of course, I'm going to test it. So there we go. What's nice about these porcelain spoons is they don't heat up the same way that a metal spoon does. And that is tasty. All right. Also, with Better Than Bullion, if you want, you can mix the different bouillons. So they have a garlic bouillon. So if I really liked the garlic flavor, but I wanted to have some chicken, you could kind of go half and half with the garlic and the chicken, or whatever else you wanted. I'm going to add something that's going to add both texture and a little extra flavor. There's a flavor called umami, and it's the 5th flavor, and it is found in mushrooms and other things, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we're going to use dried mushrooms, and you can get those at Shaw's or Hannaford. You won't get this size, however. They come in smaller sizes. For 2 or 3 quarts of this soup, the small containers that you would get at Hannaford or Shaw's, you would just use the whole thing. I think it's about like maybe an ounce or 3/4 of an ounce of dried mushrooms. And these are shiitake mushrooms, and you can get this size package at the Asian market in Portland. There's several of them. The 2 that I usually go to, they're on Congress Street. One is the Sun Oriental Market. That's run by some Korean folks. I think it's the oldest Asian market in Portland. I believe it was established in the 1970s, right across from the State Theater. There's a newer market called the Hong Kong Market, which is down the hill towards Maine Medical, and they're both very good markets. They both carry similar things. It's just that if you kind of get used to them, you might like one more than the other. So these dried mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms. Shiitake means oak, and they grow on oak logs. And you want to use dried ones if you can, because the drying process actually concentrates that savory umami flavor. You can use fresh mushrooms. The texture will be different, and it won't have quite as pronounced flavor. But if you don't have these, certainly you could slice up, some portobellos or the white mushrooms that you would get. Sometimes you can get fresh shiitake mushrooms at the grocery store. You could use those. Also, these mushrooms, they come whole and they come sliced. What I have found is that by weight, the price is the same. So if you can pay the same price and have someone else do the hard work of slicing these guys, go for it. If you buy them whole, what you're going to need to do is you're going to have to put them in here, in the broth, wait about 15 or 20 minutes so that they soften up. You're going to have to pull them out. They're going to be hot. And you're going to have to cut off the stems, because the stems are really tough. and then you'll slice them up and you'll put them back in. If you do this, you can do what I just did, is just throw them in. Okay. There are other types of mushrooms as well. Another one of my favorites is called tree ear mushrooms. And they kind of look like little ears, wrinkled ears. And they were named by, the story goes, they were named by an intoxicated poet who fell asleep in the woods, as literary people sometimes will do, and woke up and imagined that he could hear the trees whispering to one another, and looked up and there were these ears that were in the trees, and so they were tree ear mushrooms. And actually the Latin name for those kinds of mushrooms is Latin for ears. So apparently it caught on from China to Europe. So these are being reconstituted. And let me just I can kind of show you. It doesn't take long for the sliced ones to get reconstituted, but they're softened up, adding some flavor. So that umami flavor comes from something called glutamate. And so some of you may have heard of monosodium glutamate, which is a man-made version of glutamate. It's a salt, monosodium glutamate, and that was invented in the 1950s. And one of the largest users of monosodium glutamate was the armed forces, because they use monosodium glutamate to flavor the canned foods that the GIs had. But glutamate is naturally occurring. I mentioned that you find it in mushrooms, but it's also found in other savory things that you probably like. So if you like wine and other fermented things, that flavor is glutamate. Vinegar is glutamate, so that's just wine that's gone beyond its time. Tomatoes have a lot of glutamate, so if you like tomato sauce, that's one of the reasons you like it. Rare steak, grilled, has glutamate in it. So if you like barbecue steak, you're there. So we've got our glutamate going in here. So let's talk a little bit about the wontons. The filling for the wontons is usually a ground protein, and traditional is pork. So I've got some ground pork right here, and we're going to add 2 Chinese aromatics, which are part of the Chinese flavor base. So if you have these 2 things and then one other thing, you can be pretty much guaranteed that it's Chinese based. And one of them is garlic. And so fresh garlic is best, but if you have garlic powder, you could use that. There's also granulated garlic, and there's also the garlic you can squeeze. So the kind of the pureed garlic. Oh, and there's also the jarred garlic whole cloves. But you know, fresh garlic is easy to get, and in fact, this garlic grew in our garden. So, in fact, it's time to plant your garlic now before the ground freezes, if you haven't already. So, the way we're going to work with our aromatics are our other aromatic is going to be fresh ginger, and again, you can get that right in the produce section. But you can also get it dried, you can also get it pickled, preserved. But, so we're going to use this. This is probably one of the most important tools that's in a Chinese kitchen. It's a cleaver, it's an all-purpose cleaver. It's not a heavy-duty, take a cow apart cleaver. The most important thing about the cleaver and any knife is that you keep it sharp. And the way you do that is before and after you use your knife, you're going to hone it, and you're going to use something called a steel. So you probably have a knife and one of these in your home. This should be used before and after you use your knife. And all you need to do, your knife has to be sharp to begin with, so you want to take care of that. But if you simply do this a half a dozen times before and after you use your knife, it will stay sharp. What it's doing is it's aligning the microscopic teeth that are on all blades, on all sharp blades. And if you do that before, you'll be lining it up, and if you do it after, you'll be lining them up. This is no different than what the barber used to do with a leather strap. Certainly the leather strap was not going to be taking metal, because it just wouldn't. What all it's doing is it's lining up the teeth. And that's exactly what's happening here. You can get, this is called a steel, you can get steels that do actually take some metal. So they're like diamond or ceramic. But in reality, all you need is just a metal steel. It has little ridges on it. And when you use it, just make sure there's this finger guard. Get your fingers behind that. Because if you have a really sharp blade, you are pulling it towards you. Just like that. And you're doing a really shallow angle. Just like that. And you can't do that too much, because you're not actually taking the metal. So the blade, the cleaver is the safest knife that you can use. It looks scary, but it's very safe. So for example, why is it safer than a sharp knife? All right, it doesn't have that point. The point is here, it's there, but it's not someplace where you can stab yourself. The other thing is that when you hold a cleaver, you want to choke up on it. Don't hold it back here, because when you use it, it can slip, especially if your hands are a little bit wet. If you hold it up here, you can control the angle of that blade with your thumb and your index finger, just like that. And then what you can do is you can use the wide part of the blade against your knuckles, so there's lots of area there, and then you can control where that blade goes with your knuckles. So if you can feel that blade, the side of the blade against your knuckles, you know exactly where that cutting edge is. And I can use my fingertips, to make sure that that blade is angled away from my fingertips. So the cleaver makes a great bench scraper. So I can move things around very easily. But the most fun is what it can do with spices and aromatics. So you saw it can cut, but what it can really do is I can take my my fresh garlic, and I'll just kind of slam it down on this, and it just pulverizes my spices, just like that. So I like garlic, so I've got 3 of them here. And then I can just walk that cleaver right along my garlic. There. Again, I'm using the side of the blade to just guide that cutting edge. And then I can just scrape that out of the way. So what I've done is I've got this combination of smashed garlic, so all of the flavor and everything is coming out, but I've also got some pieces of garlic there, so that I'll be able to kind of bite into that and get some garlic flavor when I eat my wontons. Garlic. So this is fresh ginger, and what I'll do with the ginger is I will cut it so that the grain of the ginger is short. So if it were a log, if this ginger were a log, the grain is going this way, right? And I'm cutting across the grain, I'm making coins. And the grain is very short. What that means is that when I hit this with my cleaver, that grain is just going to fall apart. All right, so here's the coin. That's about, that's a 1/4 of an inch. And so what I'll do is I'll take my cleaver and all right, you can see what happened. It's pulverized. And then I'll just take that. There we go. And if they had smell-o-vision for computers, you would smell this wonderful garlic-ginger combination. All right. There. So, there's our aromatics. The third flavor of the flavor base is scallions, or green onions. And we're going to be using that later for a garnish. But ginger, garlic, and scallions are kind of the 3-part flavor base for Chinese cooking. So whether it's soup or stir fry or frying fish or anything like that, ginger, garlic, and scallions, people will say, wow, that smells like Chinese food, and that's why. All right, so now, remember I mentioned that we're going to have some cut up protein, and this is the ground pork. And so what I'll do is I'll use my cleaver and I'll just use that to incorporate that ginger and garlic right into the filling. I will add one more flavor that is recognized as being Chinese, and we'll recognize that it's light soy sauce. So that's well mixed in. That's great. So the soy sauce, as I mentioned, is called light soy. Light soy is regular soy sauce. All right. The low sodium soy sauce is the stuff that has the green cap. This is the red cap. This brand is one of my favorites. It's Kikkoman, so it's readily available. There's lots of different brands, but if a recipe asks for soy sauce, that's what they're asking for, is light soy. I don't recommend that you use reduced sodium soy sauce, because what I have found is that you actually have to use more soy sauce, more of that to get the right flavor. For people that drink beer, low sodium soy sauce is like light beer. And so if you really like the flavor, you're not going to really want to use that. However, if you're on a sodium reduced diet, you could do that. Although I would say just use like half as much regular soy, and I think you'll get the same thing, and you'll get probably a little bit better flavor. All right. So I'm just going to add just a teaspoon of our light soy here. And again, I can just use my cleaver to incorporate that in nicely. Doesn't take much at all. There we go. All right. So that's our filling. You could play around with this flavor. This is the basic. You know, if you want to go with, you know, some extra spice or something like that, you could do that. If you wanted a little teriyaki touch, you could add a little bit of sweetener, you know, sugar, honey, maple syrup. You could also go seafood. So you could chop up some scallops or some shrimp, or if you wanted to impress someone, you could get some lobster, cooked lobster, and you could kind of cut that in. I would still put in some pork, because the pork has something that's really important for flavor, and that's fat. FAT is an acronym. FAT stands for flavor and taste, which is why we all like butter. Okay, butter would be good. In fact, butter with lobster in the wontons would be kind of interesting. Chicken, ground chicken would be good, beef, what have you. All right, so that's our filling. So let's talk about the wrappers. All right, so these wrappers, you can get these all pre-cut right in the produce section. There's a refrigerated section near the produce, and it has wrappers, tofu, sometimes it'll have noodles, egg roll wrappers. So these are the wonton wrappers. They're just little squares of pasta. And I think these are vegan, but there are some that have egg. But they're just dough. And what we'll do is I'm going to show you how to make a wonton. So you're going to take just a teaspoon of filling. You can put it right in the middle. So I like to use a metaphor, baseball. It's a good way to remember. So this is a baseball diamond. There's home plate, first, second, third, and there's pitcher's mound. And that teaspoon of stuff is right, the filling is right on pitcher's mound. Then you're going to take some water, and the water is your glue. And you're going to run the bases with the glue. Then you're going to take home plate. You're going to take it up to second base, making a right isosceles triangle. So all you math people, you know what this is. And that is a wonton. So that's the basic one. I'll do it again, just so you can kind of see. Here's the one. And you want to make sure, by the way, that you get only one. Sometimes they stick together. And but let's take our teaspoon, put that right there. Paint the bases, nice and easy. And home plate to second base. Don't do it the other way around, because your isosceles triangle will be upside down, and you won't be able to do what I'm doing right here. There, just sealing that. And there it is. Now, you got that, right? Nice and easy, baseball. Let's do the intermediate one, differentiating instruction. Challenge by choice. So, we'll start again. They all start the same. All right? And so this is like your first test. How does that look? Too much. If you put in too much, you're not going to be able to fold it up. All right? So just put in a teaspoon there. All right, you still paint around the edges. There we go. Home plate, second base, Seal it up. All right, so now what you're going to do, you're going to hold it in one hand. If you're left-handed, you'll hold it over here. If you're right-handed, you'll hold it over here. And you're going to take one corner of the triangle and you're going to flip it over to the center, right over Pitcher's Mount. You're going to take the other corner and then you're going to squeeze. So you've kind of wrapped it around your finger, your bad finger. And you've got the dinner napkin or the Pope's hat. I don't know which one. Whichever one you want. All right? Okay, one more time. One more time. If you're in the kitchen, do it along with me. If you're on the couch, don't worry about it. All right, so we'll put on our teaspoon. We'll paint the bases. We'll take home plate. We'll bring it up to second base. We'll seal that up. We'll wrap it around my bad finger, not tightly, because I got to get it off, and we'll just squeeze like that. And there it is. All right. Ready for the advanced one? All right. There we go. This is being recorded, so when you watch this later, you can pause it and you can reverse it, rewind. All right. Again, it's going to start the same way. Paint around the bases, just like that. Make our isosceles. All right, here we go. Now, we're going to hold it like a bandana, right? Just like that. And we're going to make two ears. I'm going to take my bad finger, I'm going to push it down, make a little divot. We're going to push it straight up. Can you see the ears? Then we're going to cross the ears up top. So you're not going to go front to back. You're going straight up. You're going to squeeze. And you're going to end up with kind of a tortellini if it were round, but it kind of looks like a motorboat maybe, or it might look like Little Red Riding Hood. Anyway, it's a different shape. So just to kind of compare, here's the simple one, basic. Here's the Pope's hat. And here's the tortellini one. Oh, got away. And here's the tortellini one. So you can see they're all kind of different. So I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to make some soup, because I am getting hungry. All right. So we'll take a teaspoon, put that on Pitcher's Mound. And you can do this really quickly if you're not talking. There we go. Home plate, second base, seal it up. Okay, get that finger out of there. Don't leave your finger in there. That's a different fold. Okay, make the ears. And just, it's almost like you're stretching the wrapper. You're going straight up. Straight up. And just squeeze that. If it doesn't stick, just paint a little bit of water glue on that. So, there you go. Now, that's the advanced one. I'm going to do it one more time, just so you can see it. And, after you get used to these three, you can make your own up. So you could kind of figure out, maybe you can make one that looks like a swan. No, I don't know. Origami. So there you go. That's all right. And then push down, make ears, and cross them at the top. All right. So we've got some wontons there. All right, so you want to make sure that your broth is simmering, and we're going to put these guys in. You got to put them in one at a time. You don't want them to be stuck together when they go in, or they'll just be stuck together. but you can put them in pretty quickly. You only want to cook as many as you're going to eat, because they are no good after about 10 minutes, because they're pasta. So they're gonna, the pasta will overcook. So you don't want to cook any more than you're going to eat. But you can make them all, and then what you can do is you can put them on a cookie tray and freeze them, and then put them in a Ziploc bag or a Tupperware or something like that. And this winter, in the next month or so, you can come home from work, long day at the library, or it's cold out. You can just boil up some broth, throw in as many as you can eat, and in like 5 minutes, they'll be ready. As it is here, it takes about 2 minutes for the wontons to cook through. And I know it doesn't sound like much time, but remember, you've only got a teaspoon of ground pork. Oh, and that's the other thing, is it should be at room temperature. Most traditional recipes do not come from a time when there was refrigerators. So let things come, safely to room temperature before you kind of start doing things. But this will cook in 2 minutes. While that's happening, what we'll do is we'll put in, this is bok choy, which is a Chinese cabbage. So here it is right here, part of the mustard family. There we go. I've already done this, but you're going to want to make sure that you wash the base, because it kind of grows close to the ground. We'll just cut part of that off. And what I like to do is I'll cut it at a double angle, it's called. So what happens is I'm cutting it at this angle, so my blade, but I'm also cutting it on the bias that way as well. And what that does is it exposes more of the interior of the bok choy to cook, so it cooks like within a minute, but it stays crispy, which is kind of fun. So we'll just put these guys in. My wontons are pretty much cooked. And remember, I talked about that third flavor base is scallions, and so I'll pull out a couple of these guys. So I use the whole scallion except for these little rootlets, and I don't know if you know this or not, but this last half inch or so of these roots, if you put them in water and put them on your windowsill, they'll grow scallions, like within like 2 weeks, and you'll have more scallions. All right, but what we'll do is we'll also cut these on the bias, about, probably 1/4 inch. And what I do is, before I put these into the soup, which is ready for me to eat, or you guys too. All right, what I do is, okay, so that's boiling. So I will take the scallions and I'll squeeze them. So I'm bruising them as I put them in. And so that releases a lot of that third part of the flavor base. So I've got ginger, garlic, soy sauce, I've got the broth, and then I've got the scallions. So that's all flavoring this soup. All right. So let's grab a bowl or two. And I'm going to kill this heat. There we go. And we got some mushrooms. We've got some dumplings. There we go. And some broth. And so there you go. You've got some clouds floating in the soup. There you go. Some for you.
Oh.
Can I have some?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I can't tell you how good it smells here in this library. It's incredible.
There we go. All right. And those mushrooms are going to be very tasty. There we go. And some broth. There we go. And these spoons are perfect for scooping up your wontons in the broth.
Thank
There
you,
go.
Chris.
And they don't heat up. So, I don't want to torture, well, maybe I will torture you. So we're going to get ready to answer some questions that you might have. And I will hand the sound and controls over. And I'll try not to slurp too loudly.
If anybody has any questions for us, you can either unmute or throw them in the chat, and I'd be happy to moderate while Chris continues to scoop. And we learned I learned so many things tonight, so many amazing tips for sure.
It's fun.
I have a question.
Oh,
Do you peel the ginger before you?
Oh, that's great. That's a good catch. So no, I don't peel the ginger. You can wash it, but there's really no reason to peel it. And I've heard that there's a significant number of vitamins and minerals and things like that, just like there is in potato skin and other skin. So no, and that's like 10 minutes of your life that you won't get back.
this is true. Questions from home?
So this recipe is in my first cookbook.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I have 5 cookbooks that I've written, and there's a 6th one coming out.
Fabulous. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. So maybe sometime in the future, if you want, I'll come back and we'll do something from one of my other cookbooks.
Sounds good to me.
But you can pick those up locally at Now You're Cooking in downtown Bath.
Oh, okay.
And the ones there I've signed.
All right.
And but if you don't want to go all the way to Bath, you can order it on Amazon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds like a book we may need to have at the library.
Oh, there's a thought. Any other questions?
I don't know. Nothing in the chat.
Yes, there is.
Oh, there is.
Hi. I had asked what vegetarian filling option would you suggest?
Perfect. So use extra firm tofu and crumble it up. And to make sure that you have a minimum amount of liquid, what you can do, there's 2 things you can do. One is you can wrap it in a towel or a paper towel, put it between 2 plates, and put a can of beans or something like that on top of it, and that will gently squeeze the water out. Another thing you can do is you can take it out of its package and then drain it and then put it in the freezer, and then take it out of the freezer, thaw it, and then squeeze that. And what happens is the freezing of it actually compacts the protein, and it actually turns it into a sponge almost, which is great, for absorbing flavor, and then just crumble that up. So that's one option. Another option is, I don't know if you've heard of tempeh, which is a fermented soybean and grain protein. And then there's something called seitan, not Satan, but seitan. And that is actually wheat gluten. with the starch has been removed, and it chews like meat. And if you put in the the flavorings, it's really hard to determine that it's not meat. So that's seitan. You can make your own, but you can also buy it. If you make your own, you got to get high protein flour, and then you like wash it over and over again to wash the starch out. But like what is that called? Not miracle meat, but impossible meat, or impossible burger. That's seitan.
Okay.
And fake chicken is seitan. Chopped mushrooms too could be used as a meat substitute.
Nice. Well, I missed that in the chat, so if there are others, please feel free to unmute in the next few minutes if you have anything for us.
Before I go, someone was asking about the recipe, which was emailed, I believe. They said, where can we find the recipe for the soup?
Oh, yes. So when I sent out the registration link, you should have received the recipe. If you did not, then please email me and I'd be happy to send it to you.
All right, so now a shameless plug. On my YouTube channel, there's a video of me doing this. So if you want to access that, just go to YouTube, Chris Toy, or CM Toy. But if you just go to YouTube and put Chris Toy cooking, I have over 100 cooking videos like right there. So you could go there, and if you ask questions there or comments, those comments go right into my email. So I would get a notification and I would respond. I enjoy communicating about questions that people have or anything like that, or feedback. So go for it.
Sounds good. Anything else before we close for tonight and finish our soup here, our wonton?
All the wontons are gone.
Well,
Well,
so yummy.
thank you very much. Oh, there's another question?
Yes.
Yes, please. Thank you. Do you normally have wonton as like your main, or is it a starter? Because I'm used to having it as a starter, and if it is the case that it's a starter, what do you like to have afterwards?
Right. So, just as with many soups, they can, depending on the size of the serving, a cup versus a bowl. So at a banquet, soup would be one of the first things to come out, and so I don't know if you would call it an appetizer, but it would be a course. It could be a course in a multi-course meal. When I teach this as part of a meal, I'll do something like my wok baked chicken, where you can bake a whole chicken in a wok. It's amazing, and anyway. But that cast iron salmon and rice, would be good after this. But the soup generally would go first, which is why you're kind of identifying it as an appetizer. But in a banquet, there's not really appetizers as much as there's courses, and it's the size of the serving that I guess would determine whether it's an appetizer. I would say like an appetizer would be this wonton soup with maybe 3 wontons or 3 or 4 wontons. If it were a main course, there'd be maybe a half a dozen, 6 or 7, and there'd be a lot of vegetables and things like that. They also, for the main course kind of a thing or a serving, they will actually include noodles in with the wonton dumplings. So they have both. So you get to you know, slurp the noodles and you get to eat the wontons and drink the soup. Anyone else? So remember, only cook as many as you're going to eat, because they'll just fall apart.
Well, they just fell apart in my mouth. It's fabulous. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to end for tonight, and I want to thank you for joining us. Just a little poke for next week. Next week we're hosting Robin Wood in her book, The Field House. If you're interested in joining us, she would like to use Zoom. So just let me know through email or phone call, and I will send you the link for her. Thank you again. Good night, everybody. Stay healthy. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, my mouse, where is it?